tell you that in the Oversight Committee meeting yesterday, they indicated that they were all for transparency, releasing the files, and asked us to hold them accountable. Isn't that right?
Yes.
They said hold them accountable, so we intend to hold them accountable.
That's up to them.
We're going to show them where to go with it, and as long as they're doing their job, they should. I'm going to turn it back over to Ro Khanna. Thank you.
Let me just say this. Let me say this. I think the people back who are testifying here today or speaking out today, they are American heroes. Let's give them another round of applause. And you say, look, Thomas, Marjorie, and I, we're huge believers in the First Amendment, and we believe in free speech, and we take abuse all the time. But you see, you see why it's so hard to do what they have done, because they come forward and you subject yourself to national scrutiny and national questioning. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart how appreciative I am and how proud I am of what you've done today. You've made a big difference. Before I bring on Marjorie, and then Thomas will have the last word.
All right, we've been listening to survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. They've been speaking out up on Capitol Hill. It's been so emotional, so powerful, so moving. They're pushing for the release of all of the Epstein files right now. And, you know, it's just heartbreaking to hear these women, these survivors speak out. And I know you've been...
Time today, along with bipartisan lawmakers, they're calling for transparency and accountability. We heard from those lawmakers before the victims or survivors spoke. So we're going to do a quick debrief, but we'll keep monitoring. And let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, Eric Fudali, partner and managing attorney at the Bloom firm, representing a number of Epstein accusers, and Mimi Rocha, former assistant U.S. attorney. Appreciate you all for sticking with us and listening in with us. Julie, that was a powerful moment there on the Hill this morning. And as we know, this was one of two events with survivors speaking out, sharing their stories, calling for action. A lot of their message directed to Capitol Hill and even the President of the United States. What did you hear? What kind of impact is this having there in the halls of Congress?
Yeah, Anna, but so emotional from these survivors of abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It was so palpable. You heard there Ro Khanna, one of the Democrats behind this effort, to force his...
I watched the speech last night. President Xi's a friend of mine, but I thought that the United States should have been mentioned last night during that speech because we helped China very, very much.
What was the reason they should have been invited, Mr. President? What was the reason? Mr. President, do you think they should have been invited?
Yes, go ahead.
You've expressed many times your frustration and disappointment with Putin, but there's no action since you took your office.
How do you know there's no? How do you know there's no action?
But
really? Wait.
Any of these people can probably bring lawsuits if names are exposed. They can sue anyone who harmed them, and frankly, I'm sure their lawyers are encouraging them to do that.
You call that no action? And I haven't done phase 2 yet or phase 3. But when you say there's no action, I think you ought to get yourself a new job, because if you remember 2 weeks ago I said if India buys, India's got big problems, and that's what happened. So don't tell me about that.
Mr. President,
right now, there have been survivors of Jeffrey Epstein speaking at a press conference on Capitol Hill. They're calling for these case files, these documents to be released. And Thomas Massie, who is sponsoring a discharge position to get the House to vote on releasing those documents, says he doesn't believe you're implicated in these files, but many of your friends and donors may be, and he says that's why the Justice Department is redacting them and slow-walking the release. Is the Justice Department protecting any friends or donors, sir?
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. You know, it reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more. And nobody's ever satisfied. From what I understand, I could check, but from what I understand, thousands of pages of documents have been given. But it's really a Democrat hoax, because they're trying to get people to talk about something that's totally irrelevant to the success that we've had as a nation since I've been president. Even if you look at D.C. right now, D.C., it's a totally safe zone. It's called a safe zone. That's a term. It's a term of art. It's a safe zone because it's very safe. You can walk down the street now and nothing's going to happen. No crime, no murders, no nothing. Because we had a lot of problems with certain places, and we still do. All run by Democrats, or for the most part run by Democrats. So what they're trying to do with the Epstein hoax is get people to talk about that instead of speaking about the tremendous success like ending 7 wars. I ended 7 wars. Nobody's going to talk about it because they're going to talk about the Epstein whatever. I understand that we were subpoenaed to give files, and I understand we've given thousands of pages of files. And I know that no matter what you do, it's going to keep going. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having. I think we're probably having, according to what I read, even from 2 people in this room, we're having the most successful 8 months of any president ever. And that's what I want to talk about. That's what we should be talking about, not the Epstein hoax. I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see thousands of pages of files. And I know that no matter what you do, it's going to keep going. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having. I think we're probably having, according to what I read, even from 2 people in this room, we're having the most successful 8 months of any president ever. And that's what I want to talk about. That's what we should be talking about, not the Epstein hoax.
When do you make a decision on Ukraine, Mr. President?
I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
Venezuela, can you give us a sense of what the U.S. policy, or what you're trying to achieve with the aircraft carriers, or the boats, I should say, in near Venezuela, and also the boat that you mentioned yesterday where 11 people were killed? What was found in that boat, and why were the men killed instead of taken?
On the boat, you had massive amounts of drugs. We have tapes of them speaking massive amounts of drugs coming into our country to kill a lot of people. And everybody fully understands that. In fact, you see it. You see the bags of drugs all over the boat. And they were hit. Obviously, they won't be doing it again. And I think a lot of other people won't be doing it again when they watch that tape. They're going to say, let's not do this. We have to protect our country, and we're going to. Venezuela's been a very bad actor. They've been, as you know, they've been sending millions of people into our country, many of them Tren de Aragua, some of the worst gangs, some of the worst people anywhere in the world.
Today is very much in keeping with what we know about the particularly young victims that Epstein recruited, and how he and others in his orbit exploited the vulnerabilities of girls with terrible home lives, immigration issues, they were new to the country, or who had experienced poverty in their own personal circumstances before coming into his employ, Anna.
And I want to play a little bit of what we heard from these survivors. This was Haley Robson describing being coerced into having to recruit more girls to work for Epstein and be exposed to his abuse, and what happened to her when a friend's stepmother eventually called the police. Let's watch.
The police treated me like a criminal. I had, by this time, had turned 18. I had been with Jeffrey since I was 16 and for 2 years. So they had told me so they told me I was going to be arrested. My name was then distributed to the press as a co-conspirator of my abuser, who I detested. My entire world was crashing in around me, and I started being threatened and bullied, till this day still receiving death threats.
Mimi, I mean, wow, how much courage did it take for these people to come forward and tell their stories in such a public way?
Yeah, it really does. And I found everything that happened today just so moving. And it's worth noting that part of the power is this sort of sisterhood, frankly. I mean, including the family members who are not women. But, you know, survivors find strength in each other. And more survivors will come forward. And, you know, our views, our understanding of sexual assault and how trafficking works has evolved a lot since the time that happened to that young woman when she was criminalized, essentially, even though she was really a victim. And the Southern District of New York, my old office, in 2019, successfully charged and brought to justice Ghislaine Maxwell for being a trafficker, for being a child predator. And the last thing I would note is that what is so striking is that part of the answer to the why now from these survivors is you, government, you, DOJ, not political, but you, the Department of Justice, are trying to undo that one sliver of justice that we got. Maxwell was held accountable. Epstein, you know, was charged and would have gone to trial. And now you, the DOJ, are giving her a platform, Maxwell, to lie. And that is what really seems to have spurred them forward. So the Department of Justice needs to get back to what it's supposed to do, which is represent victims and listen to survivors.
And Eric, one of the other things that stood out from Haley
Why is the Department of Justice representing a sexual predator?
That the lack of transparency, the lack of having all of the information out there has led to rumors, has led to these conspiracies, and in effect has caused even more pain for these survivors, even more traumatization for these survivors. It's one of the reasons they say, put it all out there. Let's get the truth out there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would also even go as far to say is re-victimization of these survivors. You know, they have to, every time they turn on the TV or open their, you know, social media, they have to see Epstein's face. They have to see news of Ghislaine Maxwell being moved to a, you know, a minimum security resort. They have to see Ghislaine Maxwell being given a platform to deny things and create her own conspiracies. Without transparency, we have nothing but rumors. We have nothing but nonsense is what we have. All the victims want, they don't care what side of the aisle is benefiting from this. They don't care who was on the plane more. All they want is transparency. They don't want a lot. They just want transparency and be able to have the closure that they deserve, the justice that they've been seeking for decades and decades, where law enforcement has wronged them every step of the way. That's all they want. It doesn't seem as too much to ask.
Everyone, thank you so much. Got to leave it there. Really appreciate all of your analysis. That does it for us this hour. Chris Jansing starts right now.
Good day. I'm Chris Jansing, live at MSNBC headquarters in New York City. Silent no more. Survivors of sex predator Jeffrey Epstein blasting a system they insist is rigged to protect the rich and powerful. But can Congress answer their calls for accountability with anything new? And what President Trump just said about all of this, his comments at the White House. Plus, Power Parade, a trio of American adversaries on hand for a show of strength in China. Row upon row of tanks, missiles, and goose-stepping troops. What it says about the balance of power between the U.S. and what's being called the axis of upheaval. And rationale rejected. The president's bid to use an 18th century law as legal justification to round up alleged Venezuelan gang members shot down by one of the most conservative courts in the country. So what does it mean this Wednesday? But we begin with the Jeffrey Epstein case at a crossroads on Capitol Hill, where 8 survivors, one after the other, just described a dark and disturbing world around Epstein. Many of them going public for the first time, joining bipartisan members of Congress in a concerted call for the truth behind their own horrific stories of abuse.
I have never been more scared in my life than I was that first time that he hurt me. This guy was so rich and had so many pictures with so many famous people, and no one would have ever believed me if I told them.
He gave me an ultimatum. Either you come here and massage me when I call you, or you bring me friends of yours to massage.
Epstein flew me to his private island. He listened to my dreams, promised to help. But his promises came with a catch. The abuse began. He told me to keep it secret.
Those kinds of stories, as well as accounts given to lawmakers behind closed doors, are galvanizing a push for more transparency and accountability. But the question remains, are they looking for answers that are being covered up or that simply don't exist? The DOJ has already begun releasing Epstein-related documents, more than 33,000 of them just yesterday. But the vast majority had already been made public. None were revelatory. That doesn't quell bipartisan calls for more information, with some of the most pointed.
It's not a hoax. This is real.
The shame does not fall on these brave, courageous women. The shame falls on the people in power over the past several decades that protected the monster, Jeffrey Epstein, and his cabal that continued a nightmare.
He is also publisher of The Hardaway Wire. Kristen, it is an understatement to say that what we heard today from these brave women, the stories are horrific. At their core, they did tell us something we already knew. Jeffrey Epstein was a monster. But is there anything you heard that points to a legal avenue that hasn't yet been explored?
Well, it's really in upholding that bill. With regard to the legal avenue that we haven't heard, we did hear from one survivor who said, listen, if you guys do not give us the transparency that we are asking for, the transparency that we deserve, the transparency that we need to heal, then we're going to put together our list. And keep in mind that if they put together their list, that could open up additional legal avenues in the civil justice system, where certain statute of limitations may no longer exist or may be revived, but it also could open up some legal avenues in the criminal justice system. But of course, the main legal avenue here is the legislative avenue, and that's whether or not this transparency bill can actually be passed, because they need accountability and they deserve to heal.
So, Allie, all this went from being, I guess you could say, a kind of a far-right conspiracy theory-driven issue to one that Congressman Massey calls a litmus test for lawmakers on both sides. Are we actually seeing one of those very rare issues, not just where both sides are coming together, but maybe could get some things done? Do you think that what we heard from the steps of the Capitol today that was so powerful might change some minds?
I think it remains to be seen, Chris, but as much as the survivors and the lawyers out there today were saying there's no room for politics in any of this, this is very much a political matter, especially because Massey, of course, has regularly earned the ire of the White House. In this instance, he's certainly getting that, even just in response to the Massey-Khanna push for transparency, which is what these survivors were out there to speak specifically about today. The White House issued this response that I'll read to you a part of. They said, helping Thomas Massey and liberal Democrats with their attention-seeking, while the DOJ is fully supporting a more comprehensive file release effort, would be viewed as a very hostile act to the administration. It's that last part of the sentence there that I think is so important and informs the politics that's very, very palpable here on Capitol Hill. You have someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene there standing with Massey and Khanna as someone who is putting her name on the discharge petition, putting her crossways with an administration that has really shown they would rather farm this out to the Department of Justice to handle. On the DOJ front, the Oversight Committee has received a batch of documents so far from DOJ, but most of those were already public. The chair of the Oversight Committee says that they will continue receiving rolling amounts of batches. But on my show this morning, I asked one of the Democrats that's on the House Oversight Committee, do you have any idea when those next batches are going to come to your committee? He said no. And so it's an open question of, okay, even if DOJ is complying with the oversight subpoena for the information that they have, what are they going to give? When are they going to give it to the committee? And then what happens when the committee ultimately gets it? I do think that today marked a strategic change, though, and it echoes
echoes one that we've heard from lawyers like Brad Edwards on our own airwaves saying we have to remember what this is all about. At the end of the day, this is about the survivors who spoke, who gave their stories, in some cases for the first time today. It's easy to say no to a dry piece of paper about Epstein case files. It's harder, and I think that's what these survivors were saying today as they directly addressed President Trump through the cameras and other lawmakers, saying we, the survivors, need transparency for healing and so that we can, in some cases, understand our own stories.
Well, this is the key question, Michael. Is Donald Trump listening? It was fascinating to hear one of the lawyers for the victims saying there was a point at which Donald Trump was not just verbally supportive, but he was actually trying to help them years ago with this. And they're trying to figure out how he made the turn. And by the turn, almost simultaneously, within minutes, you heard Donald Trump in the Oval Office being asked about this. Listen to what he says now.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. You know, it reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more, and nobody's ever satisfied. From what I understand, I could check, but from what I understand, thousands of pages of documents have been given. But it's really a Democrat hoax because they're trying to get people to talk about something that's totally irrelevant to the success that we've had as a nation since I've been president.
Well, that would be the first Democrat hoax that Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke passionately in support of. What do you see is going on here?
Well, we first have to remember, again, Epstein was Donald Trump's friend for a very long time. He also reportedly is in these files.
But then he separated himself from
allegedly,
him and has recently.
But also, he's reportedly in these files. We don't know what it looks like, but he reportedly is in these files according to the people who work for him. So that's the first thing.
Nobody has suggested he did anything wrong.
We don't know.
I need to say that. Nobody has suggested
That's true. But, I mean, I would just release them just to show that I've done nothing wrong. And again, he ran on this during the campaign. Let's not forget.
Absolutely.
He promised to release these files. He also brought into the Justice Department for years. And so the idea that you could just heel turn and try to change the conversation because you want to release the files is problematic politically. Here's the other thing. The midterms are more than a year away. It would actually be smarter for him to release them now. Exactly. Why drag it out and get closer to the midterms? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but he was friends with the guy, and there was a relationship, and he allegedly sold the files. We don't know what that looks like, but that is a factor in this conversation.
So, Sam, I want to play part of what we heard from a number of folks today. They say this isn't really about President Trump. It's about something much larger. The system for the rich and the powerful that protected Jeffrey Epstein. Take a listen to that.
Epstein was not just a serial predator. He was an international human trafficker. And many around him knew, many participated, and many profited. And yet, he was protected.
This is about their influence and their
a little impact, but are there going to be ramifications that will make anything change? I know that's maybe a hard question to answer now.
More of an impact is the fact that news networks were taking the Epstein survivors on TV instead of his meeting right now in the Oval Office, meaning that he was seeing it show up on his multi-screen that people were listening to these survivors. I also think that we've come to a point, particularly in the last several months, where it's not that the survivors themselves are the ones who are going to necessarily have an impact on him, but they are now coordinating with these right-wing fans of Donald Trump's who also want the information
It
out
was
there.
Notable because I was watching. It was on the screens except for a screen.
Not every night.
A screen that has 3 letters, and it's an animal.
I agree with you that the president's frustration was clear. It doesn't sound like it was frustration with the Justice Department for not releasing the information.
Exactly.
His frustration, that was very clear in the Oval Office today, is that he knows this is not going away. And he has no, which is a very odd position for Donald Trump to be in, he has no way to program this away from attention. And that clearly is frustrating him. I would also note, I mean, first of all, if you ever thought in a million years you would see like a Ro Khanna, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie press conference, I mean, it's just like, and so when you hear the survivors say, this is not political, and you heard that was a repeated talking point here, what Johnson, as you noted, is trying to give, Massie called it a fig leaf. All things can be true. That measure can go forward. The Oversight Committee can continue to do its work. But why should that negate the Justice Department heeding the call of these survivors and releasing more information? Why does that have to be one or the other? And that, to me, is the question that the administration, Pam Bondi, and Donald Trump will need to answer.
Yeah, I mean, the Justice Department, the president has said over and over again, we want to protect people. Well, it's hard to imagine anybody more important to be protected than survivors, and you have them all out there saying, yeah, you can redact to protect people like us, but we want the information out. Okay, Manu Raju was at that press conference. As usual, asked them some important questions. Manu, what are you hearing about the reaction now in the building where you are?
Yeah, I mean, look, I just walked in the building out of this rather intense, very emotional press conference, and I just caught up with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, as you noted there, is playing a key role in all of this. Someone who's been a Trump ally for so many years, one of Trump's closest allies in all of this. And I asked her about the warnings that are coming from the White House. We heard one coming from an anonymous White House official last night saying that signing on to this effort by Thomas Massie to force a vote to release these Epstein documents would be a hostile act. She responded to that, and she also pushed back on that criticism, and she also revealed, Dana, that she had a conversation with Trump about this issue today.
And this isn't a hostile act towards the administration. The hostile act has been against these women for so many years now. The hostile act is covering up for Jeffrey Epstein and everyone else that's been involved in this. And that's the real hostile act. I look forward to talking with President Trump about these women that I've met. I also encouraged him already this morning that he should have these women in the Oval Office. They deserve to be there.
You spoke to him?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And I told him I'd be happy to set that up, arranging with their attorney by sharing his phone number.
What was his reaction to that?
I haven't got an answer back on that, but I am continuing to encourage him that these are the people that deserve to be in the Oval Office, not any of Jeffrey Epstein's rich, powerful friends.
But the ultimate question is this going to change the calculus, move the dial at all on Capitol Hill? And it's just really not clear yet. I can tell you before this press conference, I talked to a lot of the Republicans who are in line with Massie on this effort, actually want the release of those files, want more disclosure from the administration. But they're also very close to Donald Trump, some of the more MAGA Republicans in the House GOP. And they simply are not yet ready to buck the president. They're saying they want to weigh this information that has come out last night. They're approaching this very, very carefully, and frankly worried about the political blowback that could occur if they do sign on to this effort. And as Massie noted in this press conference, there are just 2 more Republicans who would need to sign on to this effort to put this bill on the floor of the United States House. And it's not clear if those 2 Republicans will ultimately go there. Some Republicans, though, did indicate to me, though, Dana, that they wanted to watch this press conference before deciding how to proceed. So we'll see if Massie is ultimately successful here. But interesting moment there with Marjorie Taylor Greene saying she's taking this directly to Donald Trump, who's made clear what he thinks about all of this.
So interesting. Everything that you just reported is really interesting, including the fact that you had members saying that they wanted to watch. We'll see if those survivors changed any minds. Thank you so much, Manu. I really appreciate it. Back here at the table, Tia, I just want to play one other moment from one of the survivors who has not spoken until today. And she spoke specifically about what Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, as David pointed out before, she was actually convicted, and she is in prison, or is moved to, as one of the survivors called it, a prison spa. Regardless, what she said about the relationship that Epstein and Trump had.
Jeffrey and Ghislaine were always very boastful about their friends, their famous or powerful friends, and his biggest brag forever was that he was very good friends with Donald Trump. He had an 8x10 framed picture of him on his desk with the two of them. They were very close.
I just want to underscore, they were asked multiple times if Trump or other people we've heard of were perpetrators, for lack of a better word, and they would not answer that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, we have to remember that moment in time where Trump was probably at the height of his celebrity when these allegations were first coming to light and first being investigated. And so you can envision someone saying, hey, you know, that superstar who's got a hit TV show, that's my friend. And the survivors, what they were saying is that was part of the intimidation factor for them. It wasn't just Jeffrey Epstein's wealth. It was all the people they knew. And we heard the survivors say, why would they believe me when this guy knows all these people? I also wanted to make the point that Donald Trump rose to power in part because his ascent coincided with this conspiracy theory that the Jeffrey Epstein case was an indication of the deep state covering up for rich and powerful people. And he was put into power partially because he promised to expose the deep state and get those people, get the survivors, the justice from the rich and powerful. And that's part of the reason why people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are saying, no, we've got to move forward.
And I just want to say for the record, there's no evidence.
Predictions on how you think it'll go. I say laughs.
I predict little bitty kisses to one another.
Didn't the lawsuit last season teach you anything?
Have I Got News for You, Saturday at 9 on CNN.
I brought in Ensure Max Protein with 30 grams of protein. Those who tried me felt more energy in just 2 weeks. Here, I'll take that.